Oh, everyone,
right.
welcome to a special edition of the podcast. We have the one, the only, David Martinez, aka the founder and CEO of Raw Fury.
I'm not the founder, I'm not the CEO. Excuse me. I'm a co-founder, though.
Yeah, I mean, let's just call it what it is. You're the old person I see out there mixing it up. I'm just teasing. And also, you've been involved in the industry for a while, and also are a manager of a good friend of mine, Ryan Guerra-Letourneau. So we're good. This is, if you guys are unfamiliar with David, we're gonna get his like comic book origin story of how he got involved in the industry and his twists and turns along the way. So, real quick, could you introduce yourself to the people that are dialed in and tell us what you do in your current day?
Yeah, dude, totally. So right now, I am a co-founder of an indie publishing label called Raw Fury, and I'm also the publicist and manager for a kind of relatively unknown small Twitch and YouTuber named Northernlion. We've been him and I have worked together now for 4 years. And I knew him before that and stuff, but yeah, it's been a fun ride. So that's what I do right now. But I've been in this industry for 10 years now. 10 years this month. Literally who? Yes, David Miyazaki. That's what I think what I'm known as in the NLSS community.
So take us back. So 10 years ago, what were you doing before you were in the games industry?
I was selling cell phones. Like,
really?
It was my college job. I went to school here in San Francisco. I'm still here, and I was selling cell phones, and I had just gotten my degree in communications, and so I was looking for a job of any kind that would utilize that degree. This is like 2009. There's a recession going on. It's kind of now we know it's like the end of the recession, but back then we didn't really know when it was going to end. But jobs are really hard to get. It's very competitive. But the economy's starting to pick back up, so people are hiring at least, right? But no one's got jobs, so everyone's applying for all the jobs that are now cropping up. And so I go on Craigslist because this is what you did in 2009 when you were looking for a job. And I don't even think LinkedIn was it was around barely. And I saw this ad that was like, do you want to do public relations? I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that. Do you like video games? I'm like, oh yeah, of course I love video games. It's like, do you want to do public relations for video games? I'm like, that's a job? That's a real job? No way. So I applied for that, and I got interviewed for this internship role. There was something like 100 applicants. That's what I was told after I was hired. But they picked me and another person, and we came on. And I stayed on for 6 months or so, a little less than 6 months.
What company was this?
It's a PR firm that still exists. They're called Triple Point. I'm not sure who their clients are nowadays, but I know either they still have them, or in the past they've had large companies like Riot doing the PR for League of Legends. They've done the PR for the Pokemon company. When I was there, we had Sega as a client, so that was a lot of fun. We helped launch some indie games back when indie games were kind of a new thing. 2010. I got to work on like a campaign for a game called Limbo, which I think is pretty
popular.
Well, yeah. I was just a little account executive on that one, and I had a boss, and that boss had a boss, and so I'm just doing what they told me to do. But that was a lot of fun.
Let me take you back real quick. So you're working at your job selling cell phones. You see this ad on Craigslist. You apply for it. Like, are you like, oh, this is a shot in the dark? Is this even real? A job on Craigslist?
It's totally a shot in the dark. Like, at that point I was like, man, I just want to use my degree for something. And I knew I wanted to do public relations, and this video game thing just kind of like fell on my lap, which was crazy. I went through the process. I remember writing the cover letter. This is going to sound so boring, but I'll make it quick, I promise. But when you're writing a cover letter, you should always like personalize the stuff as much as you can. So I went to the website for the PR firm, and I noticed that they had these clients that were really small. They were people making mobile games because the App Store just launched. This is like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I was working at a cell phone shop. I was like, dude, I like helped launch the first iPhone. Like, I sold it basically in a store to people.
Mhm.
And then they launched the App Store, and people come in and they're like, showing games, and all me and my coworkers, we all playing different games. And so I kind of knew about, these new games that were showing up on the App Store. So I wrote that in my cover letter. And that's what got the attention.
What do you remember specifically, like close to semantically what you wrote? Like, I helped sell the first iPhone and talk about the games on it.
I could probably pull it up if I had known like 10 minutes ago.
No, it's all good. Like, do you remember like roughly what you said? Like,
yeah, I wrote something along the lines of, I've been selling phones and working as a retail sales consultant for the past, I think at that time it was like 7 years or something.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was like my job through pretty much my entire 20s. And I had said, I was there when we launched the first iPhone, and since then we've been keeping up with the emerging market of mobile games. This is pretty new territory. I noticed that you are delving into this as well and taking on new clients. I think that I could be really helpful in this regard since I keep up with this already. So
cool.
I wrote something along those lines, and I guess that's what got the attention of the guy who eventually hired me.
So I'm gonna take one half step back, or one big step back. What was your experience with games growing up? What was your first system or console or PC? What did you remember? Like,
this is gonna be one of those like, I am this many years old by console.
No, but like, do you remember the first game you played? Like, you didn't go from like selling cell phones to like working in the games industry. Yeah.
Okay, so my parents got my brother and I an Atari 2600. We played it on a black and white television that was small. Must have been like a 12-inch or something like that. The 2600 was not new at the time, by the way.
Okay.
It was very, very, very cheap because it had tanked. So I'm pretty old, but I'm not like the Atari just came out and I got one old.
Yeah.
What some of the first games I played were like Combat. I played Adventure, Pitfall, stuff like that. And then I played a lot of Nintendo. My brother and I got a paper route. We earned our money to buy a proper old NES, and I remember playing a lot of Super Mario Brothers 2, Zelda 1, Metroid, even though I didn't understand what the hell was going on. Final Fantasy 1. I actually played a lot of Final Fantasy 1, even though I still didn't really know what was going on. We'd rent them from the video store and stuff. It was cool.
But tell me about your paper route. What was your role in that? It was you and your brother? No, this because I think it's gonna tie in later. I'm interested to hear. Like, was it your brother's paper out and you would like chuck them, or how did you get involved in that?
Dude, it was literally that. Like, my father, growing up, his job was to actually deliver newspapers to stores. So like, back in the day, we didn't have the internet. Yeah, like the stacks of newspapers you'd buy like at a 7-Eleven or your local grocery store or something. My dad was the guy that would take that to all these places in our hometown. So he worked for a couple different newspaper publications that were in our area.
Did you grow up in the Bay Area? Where did you grow up? Sorry to cut you.
I grew up a couple hours south of it.
Okay.
I grew up in a city called Salinas. It's like the birthplace of John Steinbeck. That's probably what it's most famous for. So it's near Monterey. I think more people know what Monterey is because John Steinbeck wrote about it, and it's a more famous city in general. So I'm from that area. It's just like a couple hours south of San Francisco. So I'm not even that far from my hometown. I could drive home and be there in a couple hours. So anyways,
so you get your paper out, and then like,
yeah, it was just like Paperboy. It really is. It's like you're flinging papers, you're hoping you don't hit windows, you're trying to get it on that porch. We did that. We had like the big bags on our bicycle handles, and we just went out like at 6 a.m. We're just throwing stuff out. It was fun, actually.
Was that your only job like as a kid, or did you go to school and then just focus on studies, or was that?
No, my parents did not grow up like well off. And so that, when me and my brother, when there were just two of us, because I have more siblings, but we also were not well off. So my parents ran like a cleaning business. And so my brother and I also would like go to like these businesses when they were closed, and my parents would be the ones that are like picking up the trash and like, like sweeping floors and stuff like that. And so my brother and I were doing all of that work. We'd go around with them because, kind of illegal to leave your children at home while you have to go do this work. Yeah. You might know a thing or two, right, Dan, about being a parent? Yeah.
So you would go and
So,
help them. I mean,
yeah.
and just to be around. And do you remember thinking about it being like, hey, my parents have this business and I'm running it? Or what do you remember about seeing that or
I
being a part of that?
remember I remember knowing that my parents did this work for other people and that they were paid for it and it was their own business. That's really about all I understood. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old when this was going on. Um, what I didn't know at the time is even before that, a couple years prior, like we were living on food stamps and stuff. So like I'm a product of the social systems that were in place in the States at the time. So I'm a firm believer in them too, because my parents started their own business, and then they bought a business, and then they purchased a home, and then now they own another property. So fast forward like 30 years, and they're doing okay.
Yeah.
And me and my siblings were all doing okay. Half of us went to college, the other half have still worked up pretty well in their careers and stuff. And but yeah, we started from very meager beginnings.
I mean,
Um,
did you know that like as a kid, or is that um
mm,
or you just like that's life and it,
I think as a kid, you don't fully comprehend the scale of these things because, um, because you're so new in this world, right? But here, I'll give you an example of where I learned that maybe my family was not equal to another's. There was this family that hired my parents to clean their home like once a week. And of course, I'm grateful that they gave my parents business. But this family had children that were the same age as me. So, and I went to school with them, and we didn't really like. I wasn't really friends with these kids. It's not like I disliked them. We just didn't
yeah.
hang out. But you know, that's when I realized like, oh, these people have a better living than I do. They have a much bigger place. Their children have more toys. I know because I would go and help clean this house and see the toys. And so yeah, every once in a while you got these kind of examples of how maybe your family isn't as well off as other people's, but we never really thought much about it either. You just go on and you live your life. We had a great childhood. Like we were still kids and
Yeah.
we still had a lot of fun. I got to play a lot of games. It was a great way for my parents to just have us, not bother them for a couple hours.
Well, they're running a business
Yeah.
and taking care of you guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just found it interesting because we're gonna eventually jump into how you started the publishing, but it's pretty rare that someone does something that you do. So I wanted to try and connect the dots of where that came from for you, and we'll get to the.
I'll say this. I think that there is this entrepreneurial spirit that I probably got from my parents, and I didn't even realize it until the opportunity for Raw Fury came along. Because when I mentioned it to my father, he was really encouraging about it. And it's so funny because it seems very obvious now that I've told this story, but I didn't even think about it at the time. I'm like, oh, well, maybe this is where that kind of adventurous spirit for trying something comes from. Because there is a reason why, like, I left a very stable job at Paradox Interactive to risk this, take this gamble on a brand new company. And my wife is like 6 months pregnant with our second kid at the time that I'm doing this, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna take this job and I'm not going to get paid for like half a year. Is that cool? So, but yeah, if we get to that story, then I'll tell it.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. So,
sorry, go on.
No, sorry. So we'll get back in. So you're interning real quick. Like, what are you doing as an intern? Like, what are you learning? What are you like physically executing on? Are there any games that as an intern that we may know of, or things that you would do for certain games that we may have heard of?
Yeah. Let's see here. So, first part of your question, like, what was I doing?
Yeah.
As an intern and then an account coordinator, I just doing all the grunt work. So, when you are, when you're working at a PR firm and you have clients who are publishers, right? They expect a few things from you, and anything that was like mundane or boring or whatever, that got passed on to me. But that's how you learn,
Like,
right?
what
You
would
start
be an
from
example of something mundane that you'd have to do in a PR firm for a game publisher?
coverage reports. I hate coverage reports. It's like if you put out a piece of news, you want to see who wrote about it, right? So you have to go and like, you know, search the internet, set up Google alerts, whatever, right? And find every single bit of news for your client for that one day or whatever, so you could justify that, you know, you're doing your job basically. Or you can also prove like, oh, you know, this many people liked it. Here's, you pull quotes from the articles. This one was negative, they didn't like this thing about your news or whatever. So you had to like talk about the sentiment, and then you had to also kind of estimate what the viewership was, which is kind of impossible because you can't just, you know, go to IGN and be like, hey, how many people read that thing? So you have to use these like third party tools to kind of estimate like how many people might have seen it. Yeah, really. God, I to this day I don't like coverage reports, and I don't do them. But sometimes people do them for me.
I was gonna ask them, do you make like, is there value in it for you now in the, you know,
I find a value in quotes. I don't care too much about the exact amount of readership from a website or whatever. I care mostly about did someone make a YouTube video out of it? Is someone streaming it right now? Or did, like, you know, large websites make it or whatever? Like, if you tell me like, you know, GameSpot posted about it, I can guess roughly, you know, what that means. And if you tell me that a much smaller site posted about it, like, I'm very grateful that they do that, and I can kind of guess what their traffic is like too. But I'm not over here hounding people for like, oh, we need 1 million views, like, yeah, whatever, you know.
No, that's interesting. So all right, so you're doing these reports, and then they bring you on full time. Okay, so
I was doing more than that. You also, the biggest thing you hire a PR for in general is to do what's called pitching. So you send news out, right? Or maybe a better example, you probably get this all the time, right? You have people reaching out to you like, hey, Dan Giesling, I saw your video on this. I thought it was great. We have a new game that's coming out. I think you'll like it. You know, so that
you did a lot of that.
I did. I to this day I still do it, but not nearly as much because we have help now that you know does most of the heavy lifting. But I personally like doing it with people that I have known for a long time, because it's also a great way just to kind of reach out and just say, hey, how are you doing, or whatever.
When you were first doing that, did you find any, like, I don't want to call it hacks, but did you remember doing anything unique to maybe get on someone's radar, or did maybe, hey, this person covered it and it was a long shot? Do you have any stories or recollections of things you would do back then?
I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything specific from way back then, but like what I would try to do sometimes is I would genuinely like research an author. I was really new, so I was trying to learn as much as I could, trying to learn about different writers in the industry now and their little personality quirks and stuff like that. And so whenever if I could personalize something, if I had the time to do it, I might put something like in the subject line that specifically references like a thing that I saw on their Twitter that day or something. You know, or I might put that into the body of the pitch or whatever. Yeah, pitching is kind of an art. You learn like what works and what doesn't work. I like to keep mine really short, simple, to the point. Got to put a trailer in there, you know. This game is, you know, very quick elevator pitch. Here's a trailer. You know, I saw you like this. Maybe you'll dig it. Maybe you won't. But, you know, here's a key. Give it a look if you want to. Right? No pressure. That's always been my thing. That's why I was a terrible salesperson.
Real quick, if there's any like PR people or publishers that like what David just said is like on this end, and I'm super grateful to get the pitches. That's exactly what you want. Super short gameplay trailer and a code, because other, you know, that's like, it creates the least amount of friction on my end. You know, I don't have to ask a code. I don't have to ask for screenshots or anyways. So, okay. So you're doing that, you're sending those out, and then what else? So now as you get promoted or as you get the job, what else are you doing that's maybe a little bit different than an intern?
So as you become like, if you go up the scale, so intern to account coordinator, then you go from there to account executive, and then eventually you become what's called a senior account executive. And this is when you are managing accounts. You're the one that is creating the timelines for each campaign. So you have like a client, they've got a game, you are the one that is thinking up the ideas for how to announce the game, how to message that properly. You're probably typing out the press releases, or you're having your account executive do it. So if you're a senior account executive, you're like managing at this point a whole team, right? And you're the one that is spearheading the campaign. You're creating the timeline and you're executing it. So
so you were doing that with the current company. What game? Do you remember the first game that you really kind of got a chance to steer the ship on?
Let me think about that. God, that is a tough one. It's weird because I became a senior account executive and then I kind of left that firm and went full time into like a PR manager position. But I think maybe a one that I remember like vividly is I launched a Virtua Fighter game for Sega. It was right before the birth of our first child. I launched the latest iteration of Virtua Fighter 5. It's a really beautiful fighting game, but that one I got to steer mostly. We had Sega as a client, we had different games, and I kind of somehow took the lead on that one because I enjoyed fighting games, and we had like a small community in the Bay Area, and we were doing stuff with that community. So that was cool.
Cool.
I really like that.
So you do that, and then how did your next move was to Paradox?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So it's a good story actually. So Paradox was a client of the firm I worked at. So I worked on their account for a while, for a few years.
Do you remember what games you worked on or what you would interface with them on?
I totally remember. Yeah. I mean, I had launched, when I say I launched, I mean, like I helped launch. Yeah. The original Magica, Crusader Kings 2, Europa Universalis 4, all the way to like City Skylines, got Mountain Blade Warband, Pillars of Eternity when that was published by Paradox. Trying to think of what else would be recognizable. I think that's probably enough.
So you worked with them, with your firm, interfacing with them on these games, and then they're like, "Hey, you did a great job. We need you." Or how did that go down?
Yeah. So I had been working with Paradox at that point for a couple years, and it was a much smaller company back then. So I worked pretty closely with the chief marketing officer. And her and I, like, we bonded pretty well. She's like super cool gal named Susanna Mezagram, and she's not at Paradox anymore, but she's like an investor and stuff. She was with that company when they were like, I think like 10 people, all the way to when she finally exited when they were like 300 or something. her and Fred, the also former CEO, like they're largely responsible, I think, for the growth of that company and maintaining its culture. So I worked a lot with her, and she was in San Francisco for a press tour. That's when you take a few games to different outlets. Like, in San Francisco, we have like IGN's here, GameSpot's here. Back then, also like One Up was here. PC Gamer is still here, actually. Giant Bomb, like all these places, right? They're all here in San Francisco. So we would bring a few of our games to like a location, and then we'd invite all of the media that were in the Bay Area to come check out our stuff. So she was in town for that, and she was in town with a friend of ours named Gordon, and he was the producer of a game called War of the Roses. So we were showing that off, and I'm interviewing for jobs, and so because my friends here, I just traveled all the way from Sweden, I was like, I should tell them I really like working with them, and I should tell them that this will probably be the last time we work together, because the next time they come here, I'm not going to be at this PR firm anymore. I'm going to try to interview for like EA or something like that. Okay. A friend of mine had started to line something up for me, so I was getting my resume and stuff prepared. I was.
Were you unhappy, or are you just ready to do something?
No, I was about to become a father, and I just wanted to find a job that paid a bit more. Bay Area is expensive. Kids are expensive. So that was it. By that point, I was working with Paradox, I was working with Sega and a few other smaller clients. And so I told Paradox folks, like, I'm really going to miss you guys. And so we're in a Best Buy walking around buying equipment for the press tour. And I tell Susanna, like, I'm going to leave. And Gordon just looks over and he goes, you should hire him. And she looks at me and she goes, yeah. yeah, maybe we should talk to your boss about making like a special arrangement or something. So what they did was they came up with this really unique thing where because they're based in Sweden, there was really no way to pay an American. But what they did was they paid the PR firm my salary in exchange for exclusivity. So I only worked on their account. So there's this really interesting hybrid agreement where my PR firm only had me on one account and it was only on Paradox. So eventually I left the PR firm completely and just got hired into Paradox. And when I left, I was their global PR manager. So I was the one running the campaign timelines and, coordinating with our other PR firms all over the world, the US, UK, Russia, Australia, partners in Germany and France, to execute the timelines that me and my team were creating. So that was right about the time City Skylines hit, that I had been in that position for about a year. So yeah, it's crazy to think about sometimes, kind of being there when Paradox entered like a new era for itself. Because when City Skylines hit, it went huge, and they were just flush. For years, it had been like the strategy games, the hardcore strategy games, were the ones that were paying the bills, and that's what allowed them to experiment on the publishing side. And once City Skylines hit, they were good, and it was cool to be a part of that. And
do you remember thinking like, so they didn't develop City Skylines, they just published it
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you saw that happen, like, were you like, hey, I could do this? When did you start to be like, hey, like, I actually did this? I mean, under Paradox, but you were part of the driving force, if not the driving force, on the PR side,
Sure. So now I'll tell you why I left Paradox. Because people ask, like, why would you leave that job? That's a great company. Because they are. They are a great company. It was a hard decision. But there's a story here that actually involves our friend Ryan Letourneau as well.
Well, you start mentioning EU and Crusader Kings, and I'm starting to see a bridge.
Well, that we met because I was the PR manager at Paradox. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should tell you that first. Do you want to know how I met Ryan? Because it directly
I just kind of put two and two together. The games you're saying, I'm like, well, that makes sense. Like somehow they interacted and met up, whether it was a key or what, did a deal or whatever.
Actually, it goes it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
So Paradox used to like throw this thing, they called it PDX Con. They still have it now, but it's like a consumer event. But back then it was a press only event and like a sales partner event. So you invited like Steam and Humble and whoever else, right? That was they were going to be distributing your games, and you invited press and stuff, and you showed all these, all the stuff that you were working on. So we had this event in Iceland. It was 2013. And War of the Roses had been out, and we wanted to run a tournament, and we needed somebody who could host. But Paradox is a small company, so we also needed somebody that maybe was willing to come over for a free trip and stuff, but not necessarily get paid for the hosting duties. But also, this is like 2013, so most people, like content creators, they weren't used to being paid for traveling. They were used to having their travel paid for and their hotel paid for, but they weren't used to being paid on top of that.
Yeah,
that's the norm today. But back then, that wasn't. The norm was you invite someone on a trip and maybe they'll take the free trip. And so one of my coworkers had found a channel with a little over 100,000 subscribers and a guy behind it that seemed to have a really cool persona, and he liked talking about smaller games, and that was Ryan.
Had he played any Paradox games at that point, or that?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, he hadn't played any Paradox games. I think maybe he had played some War of the Roses, but all the strategy stuff that people might remember him playing like years ago, like Crusader Kings and EU4.
Mm-hmm.
That was because he got invited to this first PDX Con. Or not the first one, but the first one for him in 2013.
So you essentially planted the seed for him to check. Well, you got him out there, and then he's like, "Oh, these strategy games are cool," and then they start showing up on his channel.
Yeah. Okay. My colleague invited him out there. Then when he came out there, he got to know us as a company, and I got to know him a little bit. And yes, that's why he started playing those games. I think the following year we invited like Quill 18,
Mhm.
and Mathis and him had become friends throughout that year. So we noticed that they were playing games together.
Wait, real
So
quick.
we
Did
had
Ryan host the event? What did he do?
he hosted this tournament. Yes, what he did was he was like a broadcaster. He was an announcer
Really?
that was giving the play-by-play for this tournament that included media, and it also included Angry Joe, Total Biscuit was there. You know, again, this is 2013. I
Yeah.
have stories about Angry Joe. I've known him since like 2011.
And then you
know,
have Ryan like shoutcasting it.
yeah,
That's cool.
exactly. Yeah, exactly that. So, yeah, it was cool.
Okay.
So that's how him and I met. So anyway, so why would I leave Paradox, right?
Yeah.
So
Real quick, there's no video of that shoutcasting anywhere, is there?
oh gosh, it's possible it's archived somewhere.
Okay.
You'd have look for PDXCon 2013. And see if there's anything there. The game would have been War of the Roses. Also, another one called The Showdown Effect. I'm pretty sure he would have shoutcasted both of them. So I don't know if they exist anymore, but they did at one point. So
that's cool. All right, so you're working for a great company, and you just have a lot of success with City Skylines. The company is taking off. You're like, yeah, I'm out of here. Like, I'm done.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly like that. But what happened was, Paradox is a really cool company, but they had a lot of stuff they were bringing in internal. So I had been asked to move to Sweden, which I think most people would be like, why didn't you do that? And I'll tell you why. It's because my wife and I had just one kid at the time, and that one kid was my mom's first grandchild and my wife's parents' first grandchild. And the last thing we wanted to do was move the only grandchild 8,000 miles away. We wanted to be near family. So I was asked twice over the course of like 6 months if I would consider it. And both times I said, this is like an incredible offer, but I can't take it. So because I couldn't take it, meant that I couldn't move up in the company anymore. Because I wasn't willing to move, I couldn't move up in the company. Because I couldn't move up in the company, now my pay is stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
And my career growth is stagnant.
Right.
So I started thinking about what I wanted to do. I'm thinking about what I want to do a couple months before we launched City Skylines. So this is like January 2015. A coworker of mine named Jonas Antonsen had just left Paradox, and he formed Raw Fury.
Say it again. Who was this?
Jonas Antonsen. He's our CEO.
Okay. And how did you know him?
We worked together at Paradox.
Okay.
And then a couple months later, he convinced Gordon to come on board with him, and so Gordon went on to be a producer. So they were the first two Furies. So Jonas is the founder, Gordon a co-founder, and then a couple months later, Gordon shoulder tapped me because I had a very personal conversation with him on a trip to Sweden, and I said, I'm going to leave Paradox. And he said, when are you going to do it? And I said, well, I think I'm going to do it by the summer, and I think I'm going to start like a YouTube management firm, like a content creator firm.
Yeah.
This is not 2015. This is still kind of a novel idea. People are starting to get paid for streams, like not just subscriptions, but actual
like sponsored deals and negotiating.
Deals and
yeah.
I'd been talking to Ryan for a while, kind of like, you keep growing. One day, maybe you'll want a manager to kind of help sort out some of these opportunities for you, or get you into places, like make an introduction to this PR person at that large company or that PR person at that large company, because PR people all know each other. So I was like, maybe if you ever want to do that, I could be that person. And he was always like kind and receptive to the idea. So this opportunity to join Raw Fury comes up, and I'm just like, okay, I could take this, I could come on for this wild ride, but then I can't do this YouTube thing that I want to do. And I think that could be really successful. And now when I look back at like,
Why can't you? Is it conflict of interest, or you don't think you could pull it off? Or
no, the time, like
okay,
I'd have to dedicate like all my time into growing like an agency and getting multiple like YouTube clients and Twitch clients, or I grow this new publishing label. So I chose the publishing label, but I said that I had one person that I wanted to work with. So I talked to Gordon and Jonas, like, let me come on board, but let me also do this one thing on the side. And they said, yeah, go for it. So the same month that I went to Raw Fury is the same month that Ryan and I started working together.
Did you push that a little bit, or like what made you kind of outline that? Was it, did you see something in him and you knew like, hey, like there's an opportunity here, or was it like, 'cause that's a pretty like, if you're starting a company, you're like, hey, I want to join, but let me do this. Like it had to be pretty important for you to bring that up to the founders of the company.
So there are a couple reasons here. I'm not going to go too detailed on it, but I can give you enough information that I think that people will understand. So, I kind of mentioned it earlier in a joking way, but when I came onto Raw Fury, we were bootstrapped. So, I was asked like, if you come on board and you don't take a paycheck for like 6 months, we'll give you equity in the company. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And my wife and I, we had savings, right? So it was a gamble. Again, she's like pregnant with our second kid. And then I spoke to Ryan and said, I'm gonna leave Paradox. I'm gonna go do this thing. And I've got the blessing to do this management thing with you if you're still open to that. And he said, yeah, I am. So him and I had an arrangement, which I won't detail.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, don't.
But that arrangement is what helped my wife and I during that 6-month period.
Like to bridge the gap until Raw Fury. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm forever grateful to him and to Kate for that opportunity, because it really helped us out back then.
That's awesome. So you're doing, so Raw Fury starts. You're managing your first client.
My only client.
Your only client. And so while this is happening, like what's your directive at Raw Fury? Like what's stage number one? You start trying to get games in front of you that are looking for, like, how do you decide, what does Raw Fury do? Or do you back people? Do you provide them PR services? What was the initial concept for Raw Fury?
So the first thing about Raw Fury that I really liked, that was kind of like a major selling point for me, is that even as an indie publisher, because we had like a small amount of backing from a private investor, that we were able to fund development, which is huge, because there are other indie publishers at the time who weren't doing that. They would be like, oh, we're going to take X% of your revenue, indie developer, and we're going to do the marketing. And that's it. But they put no money toward the development.
Can you explain what fund the development means for someone that may be listening that has no idea? What?
Sure. Yeah. So, video games cost money to make. And, if you're able to fund development, if you're able to fully pay for that, like, programmer salary, their artist salary, basically their team's salaries, right? Then they can work on a game full time. So that's what we mean by funding. Like, the publisher is paying for the project and the developers are creating that project. And then when the project is released, hopefully it's successful. And if it's successful, then it will eventually be profitable. So the money that was put into the development is paid back. And then once that money is paid back, then both parties start to receive compensation.
So without getting into super financial details, I'm imagining you have like a small development fund where you got to pick a winner in the first couple games.
Yes, 100%. Back then, we didn't have a lot of money to play with, and we had to be like super choosy. Yeah. But our first game ended up being a hit. It was a game called Kingdom, which then spawned like kind of an expansion called Kingdom New Lands, and then a proper sequel called Kingdom 2 Crowns, which just came out in December.
Were there any other, did you know when you saw that, like, this is it? Or how many games did you like kind of have on hold or pass to get when you're like, yo, this is it, this is the one?
So the story Kingdom, oh gosh, everything is so tied to each other, or to itself. Raw Fury started because of Kingdom. Like, yeah, so Jonas left Paradox to start Raw Fury, but the reason why he did was because a friend of his had tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, me and this guy are working on this game, and we don't know the first thing about trying to market it or anything. We just know how to make a game. Like, do you think you could help us out? So Jonas played the game, and he was like, dude, this is incredible. Maybe I could help you out. Maybe let me find someone. So he found an investor. He sold the idea of indie publishing label, and then, by the way, here's the first game we could sign. And the guy was like, yeah, let's do it. And that was it. So Raw Fury kind of started because of Kingdom.
Okay. So,
yeah, it's all intertwined.
So when you got on board, how much time was left to finish the development? What was your release schedule from like?
So we didn't really have a release schedule, but like from the time I got on to the time that Kingdom launched was like 3 months, which is perfect timing because that gave me plenty of time to kind of assess the game, discover what was great about like its core loop, and then how to message that properly and how to get people enticed. It also helped that it was a game that is kind of like this minimalist strategy game, and I came from a strategy company, so I had people that would be willing to take a look at it, that have audiences that were willing to take a look at it. I had developed a lot of friendships and relationships with YouTube personalities, so you could think of
the
like,
mold of the game. That wasn't like you're pitching like some random game to people, that it just all lined up.
Yeah, it was, for us, it was a bit of a perfect storm. I mean, the other thing too is it was our first game, and we had people that wanted to believe in us. So, we were definitely doing like the please, like help us out, support us. This is like our first launch, and people were very gracious and gave us their time, and we've not taken it for granted ever since. Like, I definitely have not. Like, I'm always super thrilled when I see anyone play one of our games. Like, I saw that you posted up an Atomic Crops playthrough, which I feel bad because I haven't watched the playthrough, but I saw the video pop up and I was like, oh, Dad, or like when I've seen Kate play Kingdom before, and I'm like, oh, Kate, or Bear play Goner, so I always get very flattered when that happens, and I never take it for granted.
Well, you sent me the email, and the email was, hey, here's the game, here's the trailer, here's the key. I'm like, you made it easy for him. You made it really easy. But all right, so Kingdom,
I've done it for a few years.
Yeah. So Kingdom does well. Are you surprised? Are you like, is it beyond expectation? Are you like, holy cow, I made a really good decision? Or
dude, we were absolutely thrilled. It was a complete surprise.
Are you like, take us back? Like, is there like a back end of Steam where like there's a picture of Gaben and like the sales chart? Like, how do you track it on day one? Like, how do you know, hey, this thing's got legs?
It was okay. So there is like there's a graph. You can chart your sales every hour. It updates every hour, and it from the time that it went, on sale to that first hour, it was like a cliff, and we were like, oh my god, people like it.
Like just keep going up and up and up.
It was just like, we were like, oh, like people really like this. We hit the top sellers list that day.
Were there streams going and videos come? Like, are you like monitoring like all these streams and like?
we were popping into as many streams as we could to say thank you for playing the game and stuff. I remember, I know this wouldn't happen nowadays because he's too big, but Code Carnage played it. Mm-hmm. He had reached out. He had someone reach out on his behalf, and he played the game. And I get into the chat, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm with the publisher of this game," and he started like talking to me while he was in the stream. Nowadays, I would not think that's gonna happen. Not because he's not like approachable or whatever, but he's just that much larger now. That this is 2015. Even Ryan's audience is like double what it was back then. So, just the way things are nowadays. But yeah, it was quite the ride.
So it's going, it's taken off, and then what? Like the next when that's done, or when that Kingdom's a success, you have more money to play with, or you can now work on another game. what happens next for you? Like, are you guys thinking, hey, we got to find another kingdom, or what do you?
I mean, we're definitely looking for another game. We had signed a second game already, and it was an adventure game, like a traditional pixel art point and click that didn't do too well out the gate. So,
what made you pick that? Because I could see it in my head. It's like almost like a detective-ish. It's a woman's name, right?
Yeah, Kathy Rain.
Yeah. What made you like? Those are two very different games, Kingdom and that. Like, what? Like, did you pitch that one? How did you come up with that?
So that one was because it came from a former coworker of ours at Paradox who wanted to strike it out on his own. He had actually gone to another Swedish studio after that, and then he had been tinkering on this game for like 4 years, but wanted to do it full time. So he knew Gordon, and he met Jonas, and they liked what he was doing. See, Raw Fury doesn't really have like a portfolio strategy. Like, I don't think you can really define what a Raw Fury game is. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Like, when you think of Devolver, you have like a type of game in mind, right?
Yeah.
And when you think of like tiny builds, you might have another type of game in mind, you know. And for us, I don't think people really like, they don't know what to think of us, which is fine. I like that. So yeah, we didn't care that it was, you know, point and click or whatever. We liked that. It was programmed in 4:3 aspect ratio, so it looked like it belonged on a CRT monitor. Like, you know, it takes place in the 90s. Who the heck has games that take place in the 90s? It's like a foul mouthed like female protagonist, which was awesome. She was like super sassy, you know. It was cool, man. Like, we liked everything about it.
And you had a relationship with. Like, you knew the guy, so it's not like
pretty much every one of the games that we've ever signed, there's like a story. Like, I you could name almost any game of ours, and I guarantee you there's a story. I can think of like I can think of 2 games where we got a formal email pitch. We had never met anyone from this team before, knew nothing about their game, out of like, I don't know, think like 15 games. So the rest of them, we've all got some kind of personal story attached to it.
So Kathy Rain's your second game. Then what's next? Goner? Is it Goner?
Yeah, Goner. Yeah, it's a game called Goner, which is like this really crazy avant-garde spelunky sort of thing, but it's like spelunky on acid.
I feel like that's when we first met. I met you at whatever con it was.
It was probably a PAX. I would say it's probably a PAX East. Might have been a PAX
East or West, but I just remember seeing you at your booth, and you're working the whole time. I mean, you're talking to people, and I'm like, that's gotta be like you're giving the same pitch to everyone, or like explaining the game. Yeah,
you just lose your voice.
Does that get exhausting, or is that like energizing for you?
I like consumer shows. I used to not, to be, if I'm being like really frank. I went through this dumb, jaded short era of my career where I was like, oh, I have to go to PAX. That means I have to talk all day to people about, you know, there got to be the same things over and over. But now I really know it was stupid.
Was that when you were at Paradox or when you were with Raw Fury that you felt like that?
No, that was when I was like at my old PR firms. I worked on some Paradox stuff.
A little bit different when it's your it's your game.
Yeah,
I don't want to say your game,
sure,
but you're publishing, like you are publishing.
It was a dumb point in my career where I kind of felt like I think I'm a cool person, it was a stupid attitude to take. And I'm glad that I got over that pretty quickly. And you know what solved it? I went to a PAX East, maybe the one that we met at, and I was hanging out with a friend of mine from the Bay Area, and he had close personal friends that are not in the games industry whatsoever. And I saw how much of a blast these guys were having all weekend, hanging out with each other, playing board games, and like just playing, you know, going out on the show floor and talking about what they saw that day. And I was like, dude, like, incredible. This is the feeling I never get. This is why people come here. It really invigorated me. And ever since then, I like PAXs a lot. I go to East and I go to West, and I hate it when I can't make it to one of them. And South, I've never been, and to be fair, like I travel a lot for work, so I'm not going to try to hit every PAX. But East and West are pretty essential to me. They're on my calendar.
And when you go to like a PAX, what, now that you're running Raw Fury. What's your goal? Like, what's your ultimate goal as a company? And for you, when you go to this, it's like what do you hope when you leave PAX? You pack everything up. What do you hope to have accomplished by doing that?
I mean, if we have a booth, I feel like if we're able to get a few like articles out of it, if we're able to get some, content creators to come check a game out or something like that, then I feel like that's mission accomplished.
Mhm.
Also, though, like because we're always like searching for new games to publish, I treat the indie mega booth like a little window shopping mall. Like I'm kind of going through it and seeing like what's around and what's a cool. What's maybe the next cool game, and wow, that one looks awesome, whatever that game is. Like I wonder if they got a publisher, and you go up and you talk to them and stuff, and vice versa. Sometimes you have people that are reaching out to you ahead of time to see on Twitter that you're going to be at a show, and they're like, hey, I got a game I want to show you. I haven't really shown anybody yet, but we're looking for some funding. So
have you published any games like that yet, or found any games that you've brought into development from like the indie mega booth or walking around
from the conventions?
Yeah.
Like got a couple stories actually, maybe not from the mega booth per se, but definitely like because we were at conventions. Yes, like we're publishing a game called Star Renegades, which was it's being developed by the same team that did a game called Halcyon 6.
I remember that. Yeah,
it's Ryan played it on the channel too. And I met these guys at a Gamescom a couple years back, and they came in and we took a meeting together. But it was funny because I was running press appointments, and I thought he was a reporter, so I sit him down in a meeting for one of our games, and they're giving him like a demo, and then he stays in there for like 10 minutes, and he comes out, he's like, I think I'm in the wrong meeting, I'm supposed to pitch you a game. And I was like, oh I'm so sorry. But then we chit chatted. The game looked awesome, and then we went to PAX West like 2 weeks later, and he was there as well. So I brought over a few other Furies to check the game out. I was like, dude, we gotta sign this thing. It's like so good, and we did. So that worked out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So all right, so now you've been at Raw Fury for how long?
4 years.
Okay,
over 4 years now. Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the spot now. What is your favorite game that you guys have published?
Oh god, that's such a mean question. That's like picking your favorite child. Oh god. Okay. So the one that this isn't like the first time I've heard this question, but I usually say Kathy Rain, because there's the whole story behind it. Like it didn't make us that much money up front. What we did was we put a blog post out saying that the game didn't hit our expectations. The developer, is going to have to go back to working a regular job and not stay independent. So what we're going to do is we're just going to keep paying his studio's bills until the game becomes profitable. Like we put this out on the internet, a few people picked it up. That game eventually became profitable like 6 months later.
What do you attribute that to? For a launch to not go well and then eventually go well, or get to a point where you guys made money on it?
We figured that the game was going to have like a long tail. It's a very niche game. It's a point-and-click adventure game. So we were like, oh, this game is going to it'll make its money back eventually. It's just going to take a while. The problem is that the developer can't wait that long time. So we'll just front some cash down. And then once the game hits profitability, then then we'll figure out how to get that back or whatever. But the thing is that totally it worked, and we were really happy because that guy went on to make another game called Whispers of the Machine, and now he's working on a third game. So he got to stay independent, and now he's a father now too.
That's cool. And so all because of, I mean, I want to say all because of one blog post, but the fact that you guys took a chance on him, you did something maybe, I don't want to say countercultural, but definitely, I don't know how many publishers would do that.
I'd say when you look at it monetarily, it makes no business sense at all. But I think it actually made a lot of business sense because of that act. Like I don't want to say of kindness or whatever.
Oh, but kind of, I want to say like maybe doing the right thing or doing what you felt was the right thing.
Doing what we felt was the right thing. That's a better way of putting it. because of that, we had developers who we ended up signing who were like, I saw that and that's cool. And I want to work with a company like that. And we were really, really flattered. We were like, oh, well, we're just being human beings. And they're like, well, we like working with human beings. We're like, oh, okay, cool. Uh,
Well,
so yeah.
well, that's awesome. So now, so you've been there for about 4 years. For you personally, like, do you see yourself, right? Like, this is your life's work. This is like, are you at your like optimum work happiness now doing this, and then, running, you doing stuff for Ryan? Like, do you feel like your every day is very enjoyable? You get to do what you want to do, or do you think there's something else you want to do within the industry?
I think right now I'm pretty content
Mhm.
doing what I'm doing. Like I have a lot of flexibility and freedom. Like, and I do have to say that I'm very thankful that I have a supportive family. Like uh, I couldn't even have started doing this, or taking the chance, on Raw Fury or, with Ryan and Kate, if it weren't for like my wife. Like, she's the one that had to be okay with this, and she's the one that has the job with the crazy good benefits. She works for the state,
Mhm.
so we're taken care of. And if I lived in another country, no, I won't have to worry about that so much. But in this country, your benefits are tied to your job,
Right.
and she's got a good job. Um, so I have to thank her for being able to take that plunge, and for me being able to still do this now. And yeah, I mean, I really like what I do, and I'll keep doing it with Raw Fury and Ryan as long as both of them will have me. Um, because I got a special needs child. He requires a lot of attention. I get a lot of flexibility because of I get to work from home and set my own hours, and my hours are ridiculous. Like I'll start working like at 7, then I might take a break for like a few hours in the midday, and then I'll work in the afternoon and at night and stuff. And sometimes how it is. There's
Yeah.
busy time of the year, it gets crazy. Then there's slow time of the year, which I'm really looking forward to. So, but yeah, I'm enjoying myself, and not only am I enjoying the work, but I'm enjoying the freedom that it comes with, because I know that I'm fortunate in this regard. I think you probably might feel similar. Uh, you know, you get to set your own schedule, you get to do what you like, and you get to make a living off of it, and you get to support your family in this way. And so I'm not taking it for granted.
So let me ask this. There's a young David Miyazaki listening right now, or someone in 2019. It's like, hey, I want to break into the games industry, whether in the PR side or working with publishers or developers. What someone on the outside that's trying to get in now or trying to get their first break, what would you recommend? What's the best executable advice you could give them?
Oh, yeah, gosh. It's funny because I figured this question was going to come up, and I still I'm not sure like any answer I'm going to give is going to be a good one, because
Let me
like
let me
like based on
phrase.
my own. Oh, go for it. Go ahead.
Someone wants
Rephrase.
their internet raw fury. How do they get your attention? Because or what can someone do?
Hmm. All right. I like that. It's a bit more specific, because like what worked for me 10 years ago isn't going to work
Yeah,
for someone
Craig.
today.
I don't think there's any
No,
games jobs on Craigslist now.
no, I don't think there are. But um, so I gave a talk earlier this year that was actually about how developers can get a publisher's attention. So maybe some of this will work for an individual who's just trying to get into the games industry in general. I think that relationships are key. Like they are so key. Um, and so I would recommend doing whatever you would normally do to build a relationship with somebody. Like Dan, you have channel regulars in here. You have people that probably tweet at you more frequently than others. Maybe if you've never even spoken to somebody, you might recognize someone's handle because they're
100%. Yeah.
constantly responding to you, and maybe cool and positive ways. Maybe you've even followed some of these strangers on the internet, and you'll never meet them in your life, but you do the banter on Twitter every once in a while. I think that kind of stuff is really important. I think that is the kind of stuff that can open doors for you. So I know that we have hired people at Raw Fury because we knew who they were, like, through social media prior,
and it wasn't, hey, David, give me a job, or hey, I want to interview. It's just like, hey, natural conversation.
That happens a lot too. So,
but
no,
you would, I don't want to say you would advise against it, but those weren't the people you hired, or
those were not the people.
Or maybe that
hired,
wasn't the first tweet that they sent you.
No, it's like, I mean, we're still looking for like a set of qualifications as well, right? Like if you're going for any job, you need to have a set of proven capabilities. So I think the one thing that people don't know is that like a job like community manager or something is not really an entry level job. It requires a lot of number crunching, and it requires a lot of understanding the algorithms of social networks and stuff. But people always think like, oh, I'm a streamer and I'm on Twitter all the time, so I can just be like a community manager, and that's not how it works. Like it's a bit more involved than that. But I say, like, if you just, whatever craft it is that you want to get into, if you can find someone to mentor you, if you can study that craft on your own somehow, and then you do a little bit of that networking, because that is, I think it's super important. And again, even if it's just like on social media or something, it's something, at least it's something, and then you got to keep some realistic expectations. Like I feel that you still got to shoot your shot, right? Just make sure it's like a coordinated, well-aimed shot. Don't go out there with a shotgun. That's not how you do it. Be personable, be presentable, and really study the craft that you're going for.
Okay. All right. So as we wrap things up here, David, what are you most excited about? And like now's kind of your chance. And this was the purpose of bringing you on. It wasn't for you to pitch your games. It was to hear like the other side of the story. We interview a lot of content creators here, but you're the first person we brought on that's on, I would call it, the business side of it. I mean, you run a business.
I noticed that. I mean, I've seen the interviews with Mathis.
Yeah.
Great first guest for you to have.
Yeah.
I've seen the interview with Cobalt.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the one with Kate. I saw the one with Mouth.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know you listened or watched it.
Oh, look at! I know a couple things.
So, but I appreciate you. You sharing your story, and I think a lot of people will learn a lot from this. But I'm also interested. What are you excited about that you guys have coming out? What now's your chance to kind of talk about what you've been working so hard on over the past 6 months to 12 months and things coming out. Yeah.
There's so many things. Like I guess I can only talk about the things that we've announced, because there are definitely a few projects where I'm just like chomping at the bit. I want to tell people who we're working with and what they're working on, but I can't. So I guess for now,
yeah. You can always tease something and make it an exclusive.
No, I'm not gonna. Yeah. I'm not gonna. No,
I'm just teasing.
Do that. I'm not gonna pick one of my darlings. So I'm just gonna say go to rawfury.com and please check out our stuff. That's the only time I'm gonna ask you to do anything. And
any announcements of games coming out soon that are public that you want to talk about, or anything that just came out?
I mean, we have Atomic Crops. That's probably our latest title to come out, that I think actually people who are fans of the NLSS would probably enjoy, because it's so roguelike. So it's kind of like Gungeon. It's kind of like, not so much like Isaac. It's definitely more Gungeon, but it's also Stardew Valley. So it's like a bunch of weird stuff. It's in early access, by the way. So you can also wait till it hits 1.0, which will probably be sometime early next year, and then get like the full game experience. But if you want to be part of the community and shape the development a little bit, you could check it out.
Cool.
Atomic Crops.
And then people that want to follow you, you're active on Twitter. What do you, outside of games, what do you like to do? What, if someone that follows you, what can they expect? Where can they follow you, and what can they expect to see from you on social media?
So you can find me on Twitch and Twitter as HeyDmart, HeyDmart. And what could you expect besides publisher stuff and video game stuff? I like to tweet about hip hop every once in a while.
Okay.
I collect vinyl, and I collect old ass video games. So if you like old video games, old retro stuff, like, dude, that's me 100%.
What's your crown jewel, or like what's your favorite retro game that you have in your possession or in the pursuit of?
what a question.
Or your top couple that like your
No,
favorites.
I'd say like my prized possession. It's not even like super valuable, but my prized possession is a boxed copy of the original Castlevania for the Nintendo. So I have that with the instruction book and the little styrofoam thing that went on the bottom of the box, and the black Nintendo case that you slid your cartridges into.
Yeah. CIB complete in box. I got
to
you.
complete it, dude. That's right. You know your retro vernacular.
So I'm pretty like, I want to do it, but I don't want to be disappointed. I don't know if you remember as a kid, but if you got a new Nintendo game, what it smelled like. I want to buy like a not super valuable sealed Nintendo game. Open it and just see if it smells the same. Cause I gotta imagine. Do you remember that as a kid or no?
I do remember that, man. Like I remember the feel of the box, the way that it opened up. I mean, I ripped open a few of these for, well, not ripped them, but I opened some of these for Christmas, right? It was very special memories. Like, I specifically remember opening Super Mario Brothers 2 and Zelda 2. It was yeah, man. I get that feel. I like getting box copies of stuff, but yeah, some of them are really expensive. Oh my god. But yeah, like I post about a lot of old video game stuff. I'm a huge nerd in this regard. So if you like that stuff,
if you had to pinpoint it, what's one of your favorite games of all time from like a retro era, not modern day?
Super Metroid.
Really?
Super Nintendo. Yeah, it's not a perfect game.
Let's go.
But to me, it's perfect. Like it takes everything about the original Metroid, and fixes it, because that game, the original Metroid is not a great game.
It's a little clunky.
It's too, dude. People champion it like it's incredible. Like I respect that it formed a genre, but that's it. Like beyond that, I'm just like, it's not a good example of the genre. But Super Metroid is. So I think that's probably that might be my number one game of all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on, man. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot from your story. I learned a ton, man. And we have been like friends and acquaintances in the business, and it's cool to be able to sit down with you and see all your success, because it was cool to hear, like, you took a huge leap, and, it could have went one of two ways, and I'm just glad it's gone up for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. It really does. Reflecting now. I was oh man, so scared. So scared, like terrified and excited all at the same time. But Dan, my favorite memory of you is you stealing the dill pickle chips that Corey brought for me all the way from Canada. I'll never forget that. Sitting at that table, we had just finished some beers that did I buy them or did Ryan buy them? All I know is that you didn't buy them, and then you stole my chips.
We gotta give this guy the hook. We gotta give this guy the hook. Nonetheless, follow Hey Dmart on Twitter, and take a look at rawfury.com to keep in touch with them. Although, after that, I don't know if I want to support that sort of game publisher.
I love you, Dan. Thank you so much, dude. I appreciate it very much.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, you have a good one.
You too.